And in this process of getting to know yourself, how do you find yourself on the floor? I don't mean that literally, because, well, maybe I do. How do you find yourself? You check in where you are. What's your status? I'm in the middle of a Star Trek binge watch fest that started in July last year. So you'll find a few. I'm sorry, and I keep getting it wrong. Does that make me a Trekker or a Trekkie? Trekkie. See, I'm still not one because I can't remember which one it is. But I'm aspiring. So you can run a full diagnostic, is what I'm about to say. All the cliches are coming out. Zoran is going to roll his eyes. I told him to engage this morning. Oh dear, there'd be a very private joke on and off. Anyway, and if you're what's the alternative? You're not a Trekkie. You're what's the other one? Star Wars. So we can have a fight. Jedi. Yeah, you're a Wookiee. If you're a nothing, you might be Downton Abbey. Anna. There's always no. If there's no TV, so Linda's got the option of no TV. We've all got fantasies. There are many options for fantasies. If your fantasy is the Silence of the Lambs or something, then I suggest you join the group downstairs, not this group. Sorry. Yeah. So you find yourself on the floor again, and maybe the tea or the coffee has had an influence, or maybe it has not. Or maybe it's just not detectable. And bend your knees up, and to your own satisfaction, like, could you be genuinely curious about the quality, the state of play in terms of lifting your head and directing your right elbow to your right knee, your right elbow to your left knee, and then we'll reduce the exclusivity. Could you be curious about what it's like to take your left elbow to the either knee and explore that in your own time and in your own kind of combination? And how would you go about that little conundrum of what's it like to now direct your left elbow in the direction of your left knee or the right knee? And this idea of laterality, it's very interesting. One of the little boys that I work with, he's such a contrarian. He's got very little volitional movement, i.e. movement that he has control over. So he has a lot of random, noisy movement. And the other day, he's non-verbal as well, so doesn't have speech language. We were doing a little sitting lesson, and his mum had a toy which she was positioning so that his left arm could access the toy. Because like I said, he's not going to do anything unless there's a reason for it. He's not going to do Pilates because I tell him to. So he had a toy, and I moved him so that it was harder for his left arm to get there than his right arm. And his mum said, oh, he's a lefty. And this boy, who has very little capacity to respond, the rest of the lesson, I kid you not, he only used his right arm. And he made contact with the switch with his thumb 6 times in a row, it brought, like we were just almost crying with the beauty of this accuracy of his hand placement we've never seen before with his right arm. It's because his mum said, oh, no, he only ever wants to use his left arm. Little bugger. It's just beautiful. So, he made a choice about the functionality of one arm versus the other. So you can do that. You can have a predilection. I mean, you can choose the other. You can be contrarian. You could have this idea that, oh no, I'm a righty. Well, challenge that assumption. Challenge it. See how much you could love your left arm, for example, or the thing that doesn't come as easily. And we kind of come back to this sort of idea of challenging our little assumptions about ourselves. Because already there's this little boy who's 6 years old, and his mum, who's beautiful and very aware, and she's just wonderful parent. She was boxing him into he's a lefty. And he clearly thought, bugger you, Mum, today I'm going to be a righty. So can you do that with yourself? Challenge yourself. Challenge the habit. Doesn't mean say you have to get rid of it. It's just expose it. Look at it. Beautiful. Lie down flat on your back. Was that a satisfying exploration, or did I talk too much? Don't answer that. That's not feedback I'm actually interested in. So, this talk of being a righty or a lefty or now I'm quoting Arlene, who you'll meet at some point in the future. She's a very dear colleague from San Francisco. And she'll just say, we're all a bit bi. And we mean that in the nicest possible way. So on the floor, we're kind of exploring this idea of being a bit bi. It's a bit swingy. Which doesn't mean to say we get lost and we're necessarily uncertain. But in some situations, it's good to be a lefty, and in some situations, it's good to be a righty. So do you have facility or felicity to do both? So you can tell I've read Jane Austen because I like the word felicity. That's in my past. And roll up to sitting. And find a way to sit so that your feet are still standing on the floor and your knees are still up. Zora and I were talking about this next sequence, and it's sort of, there's a reason why I've introduced this idea of softening your attitude about mistakes. And I'll do the little rabbit ear quotation thing about what a mistake is. A mistake. In this environment, they are celebrated, not punished, as it were. And why am I saying that now? It's because the next series, to our minds, probably Feldenkrais has made a mistake in his choice of what he asked the class to do, because he gets really cross with them. They are a bunch of idiots, let's just say, I'll quote. And of course they're not. So he has to backtrack a lot. He has to backtrack a lot to help them find a way to feel some kind of mastery about things. And when I was going through this last night and I was getting, frustrated, like, oh, I don't want to teach it like this. It's so hard. It's challenging. People feel inadequate. And then I got up this morning and went, no, it's really good. It's really good to feel inadequate. So there you go. I've kind of set you up to feel inadequate. Have the experience of inadequacy. So sitting with your feet like this, find a way where your arms are crossed in front of you and you're holding each thigh. So your right hand will be holding your left thigh, so in the crease of your knee, so inside your thigh. So from no, look, here's guidance learning. Just because we're going to be like this. So in the crotch of your knee. Yeah. So you're really holding the back of your thigh. That's really dreadful that I showed you. So stop looking at me. Sitting lessons are very difficult because you're going to look at me. Shut your eyes. So shut your eyes so that you stop looking at me, which is, I'm fine to be looked at, but it'll take you out of your experience and it'll just make me want to do shortcuts like show you. And now Kevin's done an interesting thing. What he's done is experiment is which arm is on top. So he didn't take it for granted that he chose the most effective one for him first up. He swapped to see, and just, did I make the right choice? No, and I don't know how many times you swapped because you went back and forth. Did he really, that's Feldenkrais, right? I just didn't take my habit for granted. I did the opposite to see what my choosing, I just had a little probe of my choice to see. Now, of course, you're going to, I'll make you swap later. So I'll make you do it. So come underneath your, Mia, come underneath your knees. The other way, from in between. That's it. Yep. Yeah, it's okay. That's all right. No, go comfortable. Go what feels comfortable to start with. And you can know what not comfortable, not easy is. And look, neither way might feel comfortable. It's not an easy thing to do. Okay, and do close your eyes now so that you go inward and just sense that. And quietly, gently, can you drop your head so that your back rounds a little bit? And can you feel that when doing that, your feet need to be fairly close to your bottom and grounded on the floor so that they are standing, so that your weight starts to shift slowly backward. Now, there's a trick. You could take your weight back by just tipping your head back. Can you take your weight back by sinking back towards the, you're behind your hips, as it were? Now, these instructions, you'll just be frustrated. This is a situation where you'll think, you just want Susan to show me what you want me to do. I don't want to show you what to do. I want you to feel it. I want you to make some mistakes. So your head sinks forward and your weight goes backwards, because something will happen in your hip joints that's rather nice. And now as your weight sinks back, would it be possible for one foot to become lighter on the floor and kind of pop up? Now, if I say lift, you might just do a big effort in one of your hip joints and lift it. Would you find a way that your weight sinks back and one leg kind of lightens on the floor? Now, that might feel absolutely impossible. And one of the sayings is Feldenkrais is about making the impossible easy and the easy elegant. Well, I might have missed one of the versions there. So if it feels impossible, go, fantastic. There's a challenge. And is there one foot that's easier than the other to lift? Now, where's the effort of the lifting? So this is an interesting thing. Is there a lot of effort in the front of the hip joint, or are you using your arm to lift? Or are you kind of finding this way of rolling your weight back? And so the leg lifts and this almost becomes a counterpoise movement. And if you keep dropping your weight back, is there a point where actually both feet, they're not lifted, they just rise? And there's a difference. There's a different experience in your feet rising off the floor and you lifting them. And if there's a point where as your weight goes further and further back onto the back of your pelvis, you might lose it. Remember we talked about this point of, there's a mobility, and Zoran's put it on the board, this counterpoise, this point of mobility, and where stability is lost and you come completely mobile, and that you might experience that as a roll backwards. And isn't that a beautiful thing, right? That's movement, and you've just, and you say, was that a mistake? No, it's just fun. And you bring yourself back onto your seat, onto your bottom, onto your seat. Well, it's your seat, isn't it? And if your tummy gets that technical judder's business, well, then you know that you're just doing too much. Soften and breathe. Okay, this is another one of those movements where life will go on whether you can do it or not. So there is no point in holding your breath. The air is free. It might be well chilled. It's free. Keep breathing. And so there's, there's a couple of people in the room whose feet popped off almost as soon as they got into this position. And so your experience, and I'll say, get used to me talking about what people are doing. Julie's feet popped off as soon as she got in this position. So for her, this whole exploration is like, what are you talking about as an exploration? It's just what happens. And for others, like your feet fell glued. And then everybody's experience is somewhere in between those two extremes. And that's the beauty of this work, is that, that this kind of gamut of experiences here in the room. When you find yourself going plop back, you can take a full rest. So if you haven't plopped back, just plop back. Fall back. It's just a fall and rest. And once or twice, with your knees bent up in this position, lift your head with your hands behind your head and direct your right elbow to your right knee and your left elbow to your left knee, like not simultaneously. We can do it simultaneously. And you can do it diagonally, you can do it homolaterally, which is just that, homo means same. Lateral means side, so the same side, so right elbow to right knee. That's contralateral, would be contra, opposite, right elbow to left knee. So anatomical language it's Latin. And I have a secret passion for Latin. I would have liked to have learned Latin, but I probably wouldn't have, because there's so much discipline involved. But so I have a closet love affair with Latin. And now roll up to sitting. And cross your arms over in the opposite way that you had. So if your right arm was above your left arm to hold the back of the thigh, do it the other way. And again, allow your head to sink towards your chest, softly, gently. It's not pulled down, it's just allowing it to sink. And then allow your back can round. And there's this idea that your weight shifts further backwards to the point where your feet get lighter on the floor. And the weight is now not taken so much on your sitting bones, but behind, and that you can roll back and back and back and end up with your head on the floor, still holding onto your knees. And there'll be a fall at some point for most people, and that's fine. So enjoy the little fall. And could you make it an elegant fall? So in this class, it's not that we learn our balance is so perfect we never fall. We learn to fall so beautifully and pleasurably that it's something that we do on purpose. So find that way. And if there's a little plop at the end, you go, okay, is that a mistake? A mistake? Fascinating. Let me do it again. I want to do it again. And isn't that the voice of the child? Do it again, do it again. And I don't, there's no sense of whether it's a mistake or not. It's, do it again. So can you have that sense of, whee! And then find a way to come back up to the sitting position. Now find a way. Oh God, you're also doing it so beautifully. Last night, I was going mental. I haven't done this for a while. I was on the floor, and the floor's quite hard in our apartment. It's like, I said to Zoran this morning, I don't want to teach that lesson. Look at you all. You just pop up so beautifully. Zoran, they're marvelous. That sounds like a judgment. You don't have to pop up beautifully, by the way. So there is an element of timing around bringing yourself back up to sitting. And that might mean that you have to move faster. There might be an element of momentum for some people. And those of you who've done a lot of ATM class, you go, oh, everything has to be reversible, which means everything is controlled all the way down and controlled all the way up. It doesn't matter. In this lesson, that's the elusive. That's very elusive. And some of us have spines that don't like to do that at the moment. Maybe when we're 80, we'll be able to do it. So find a way to roll back down and rest your head on the floor and keep hold of your knees. Breathing. The one thing is not worth compromising is what we do is that we learn to fall and breathe at the same time. Because if you're breathing while you're falling, your chances are you won't hurt yourself because you're not stiffening. So the thing is to fall with softness. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then can you come back up with the same kind of softness? Oh, lovely. And, you know, if there's a momentum there, it's fine. I use momentum. Just don't hold your breath. If you're doing this, you're holding your breath. You don't have to hold your lips. Can you suck and bring yourself up? So there's this idea about, you know, maybe your feet really want to find the floor. So there might be a little lengthening in the knees that might help you to bring yourself up. Or you maybe not. There's a timing about the knees flexing and straightening that I can't tell you because you have to find it for yourself. And it may be that there's something in the ankles where the toes want to come down to the floor. And there's a timing of that. Right? This is something to play around with. Again, the sign says work in progress. And now, next time you're sitting, hold on to the thighs with your arms not crossed. So you can come from the outside. So your arms on the outside, your thumbs with your fingers and you're holding, that's it. Yep. Try it this way. Slowly, slowly. Yeah, just each. One hand per thigh. That's it. And again, go slowly so that you can feel that connection between your shoulders and your knees, where you can find the point that you curve and your back softens, softens, and your head sinks and you roll back. And this is another Feldy back massage. You'll save so much money on massages because you've got the floor now. The floor is your masseur, neither Swedish nor Thai, nor sadistic, or sadistic as you want it to be. And find a way to go down and come back as slowly or as quickly as you like. Now I've given you the hint about this. Is it about the connection of the hands to the thighs, or is it something about the connection between the shoulders and the knees? So could you imagine letting go of your thighs? You can keep your hands in that vicinity, but there's something about the relationship of where the shoulders are with this invisible thread with the thighs, and go and do the same movement where your hands are not touching. So your legs are still in the same position. But it's not actually that your hands are pulling on your thighs. It's actually the connection, this invisible thread between your shoulders and your knees. Who knew? Who knew? Right? You know, because you might have had the idea that this was all about blocking your hands and your thighs are doing this. Oh, no, it's not. It's my shoulders and my knees. And they have a relationship and they're not even touching. Could be a revolution in relationship counseling. You don't have to touch, or you do have to touch. It could be the Australian male version of relationship. You don't have to touch. Sorry, Australian men. I can be rude to everybody. Don't worry, I will insult everybody over the time period. I do it with a great deal of love. Beautiful, rest fully, long, Now, you see, my faith in people, you've just demonstrated, because I was there last night grumping and going, oh, I don't want to teach this. It's too hard. They won't like it, blah, blah, blah. And most of you have a smile on your face. And even the people who don't have a smile on their face have a curiosity on their face. So why did I doubt you? I was doubting myself, you know. So you can see this is, you know, I've had this experience time and time again where my failings, as it were, my insecurities might have limited your opportunities. And how unfair is that? And how many times do we do that? My limitations then become your limitations, the ultimate in projection. Bend your knees and have your feet standing. And a few times, very slowly, like so slowly that it's almost like frozen moments, when your hands are behind your head, fingers interlaced. Quietly, slowly bring your right elbow and your right knee in the direction of each other. Right elbow and right knee, so it's the same side. And your left foot stays on the floor. So slowly that there is no point in that whole movement that is faster than the other point. And that there is no point in that movement where there is more effort than any other point. And that's what we mean by quality. That there's no sudden jerk or increase, and that your breathing is uninterrupted. And if that movement, therefore, is only 2 millimeters, that is absolutely fine, because we're not judging by distance. We are judging by quality. And therefore, each point in that coming together and moving away from each other is equally pleasurable. And if at any point in that trajectory I said, go back the other way, you could just as easily go back the other way. And let me tell you, when people get that quality, the movement looks elegant. So you may have to entertain the idea that you are elegant. You have the capacity to be elegant. And now the left elbow, so right foot comes back to the floor, and now the left elbow to the left knee. And the same kind of kindness. I will not entertain this idea of making my body jerk and be inelegant. I have the right to be elegant, which means every point of the movement is slow, considered, delicious. I could do it forever, sustainable and equitable. And if you're not quite there yet, you know, you fake it. Go smaller, go slower. And when you go this slowly, your awareness can be everywhere. It can be global. You can track the knee and the foot and the hip and the spine and the tailbone and the small of the back and the ribs at the back and the ribs at the front and the sternum and the back of the neck and the top of the head and the nose and the 2 elbows and the scapulae. That's what slow means. I've got time. It's like slow food. I've got time to savor all of the ingredients. And it can be delicious. And once or twice, the diagonal, so the right elbow and the left knee, enough for it to still be delicious. And if it's only 2 millimeters, that's fine. If it's 2 meters of deliciousness, You know, it's like that why French women don't get fat. They don't eat a whole plate full of deliciousness. They have 2 morsels and they really, really enjoy it, apparently, according to the book. And rest long. And let's return to your individual ink blots, your stamps. And what would be your little Rorschach ink blot test on the floor now? Well, how would you interpret that? You can be systematic about the size of the head ink blot, you know, the impression, and the chest, the symmetry of it, the arms, the length of the blots, the breadth of the blots, the pelvis. The backs of the thighs, knees, calves, heels, or whatever part of the feet. And can you even track that the ink blot is not static, that even as you breathe, the ink blot changes subtly with the breath? I was teaching in Perth, and a woman who had never felt her breath in the small of her back sat bolt upright when she felt it, felt movement in the small of her back with her breath. So if you don't feel any movement in the small of your back, that's really fine. Know that it can be quite astonishing. Feel that when your back muscles really lengthen, that just like you're all aware of the, you know, your belly billowing forward with your breath, that at some point your back muscles can release their habitual tension just like your belly muscles can, and that you can feel a billowing, well, it's not a billowing, that's an ambitious sensation. You can feel a little bit of liveliness, if you like. I've got a dear colleague in Adelaide called Margaret Mayo, and her word is liveliness. Can you feel a bit of liveliness in the small of your back? A bit of liveliness in the ribs at the back. And if not, perfectly fine. It's a territory waiting to be charted. In fact, lie on your tummy. In fact, I don't know why I said in fact. So here's the interesting, it almost seems like a paradox that you might feel the liveliness in the small of your back breathing lying on your tummy. So you'll feel your belly pushing into the floor a little bit as you're breathing, and the front of your ribs pushing into the floor. So you can feel what I'm talking about, that the dynamic nature of the ink blot when the front of you is there. Could you imagine now that you are still lying on your back, but your back is your front? And now that, you know, what is the small of your back is kind of your belly, and that's going towards the ceiling. And what is actually your thoracic spine is your sternum, and that's going towards the ceiling as you breathe in. That's a pretty kooky thing to do. Imagining that your front is your back. Your self-image is nothing if not plastic, i.e. malleable, changeable. And if the experience of feeling the small of your back moving with your breath is not novel or not even exciting, for a lot of people it's really exciting. As I said, it's like I told you about the woman in Perth who popped up. She'd never felt lively in her back. She was, quite a gymnastic kind of person. Movement, moved a lot. Was a professional instructor in some kind of movement, something or other. So it's not, don't take it for granted, this breathing life into the small of your back. Good. Slowly roll over, roll back onto your back, onto your real back. And actually, you can adopt any position you like that you find comfortable and or comforting. So before we go to lunch, I want to grow a little bit more a seed that we planted earlier this morning. Well, I watered it several times, and maybe even fertilized it, which is this idea of what our relationship is to mistakes. And you can be as demanding on yourself as you like. I want remember a time when you made a mistake, and your judgment of that mistake was harsh on yourself. And choose one where the harshness is not, it doesn't overwhelm you and you don't dissolve into tears and that you won't be able to get up off the floor because you're so racked with whatever about this mistake that you make. So something that is manageable. And just quietly, gently go into that experience where you had that, the mistake was made, as it were, and it was a mistake. And then you went into judgment about how awful you are, or what's the nature of the self-talk when you did that, when that happened. And just like yesterday, when you put the self-talk, the thinking or the feeling, you put it into the background, I remind you how you did that when we were sucking, and I invited you to stay in the sensation and put the thinking and the judgment or the feeling of shame or whatever it was, or pleasure or anything, any of those things, either way, you put that into the background and stayed with the sensation. Could you do the same thing with that situation of making the mistake? And see it for what it was. It was just, how did you sense that? You sensed that it perhaps wasn't the most effective option, the most efficient option that you chose in that moment. And just stay with the sense of it. How did you decide? You decided there was some sensory experience that you decided that perhaps wasn't the best thing to do. So I'll give you an example. This is an example I was talking with Zoran about. I was going to a colleague's place for dinner, and I took a bottle of red wine. People give me wine a lot, and I just keep it upstairs, which is apparently not the best place because it doesn't store well. Anyway, I took this bottle of wine that was quite old, maybe 10 years old, to this colleague's place, and they're wine buffs. And of course, it was corked. And how did I know that it had corked? Well, there was a sensory experience that's quite obvious there. It didn't taste very good. And I still can blush to this day when I think about that situation. I can blush with whatever that is. I can feel my face flushing with how bad I felt that I had taken this bottle of corked wine to this wine buff's place. Now, you would all say that's really bananas, Susan, like big deal. We all do that. It's just a mistake, right? Can't be helped. I made a decision. It's just how it is. Why do I still have that? I can blush to the roots of my hair about it. What's my learning from that situation? Or maybe I shouldn't keep these expensive bottles of red wine, upstairs in a hot space, But my learning is about what was so challenging to my self-image in that situation that I took a bottle of wine to a place, to my friend, these colleagues' house, and I clearly wanted to impress them, and I didn't get what I wanted. I didn't get that. I didn't get the impressing. So I can go through all those thoughts and I can rationalize it. I can sit with that sensation and just let it dissolve. So here's the thought and the sensing and the feeling that can go with it, with the action of it. Somewhere in I can't even remember now, certainly around this point, Feldenkrais does talk about mistakes as being the ultimate learning experience. Well, they are. It's just feedback, right? It is a feedback loop that tells you about the relative strength of your decision that you've made in any moment. And that it's, you can say, we can know intellectually it's a valuable learning experience. Can you experience that? Can you experience and welcome a situation where you can't do something or it doesn't feel particularly nice? Because Feldenkrais genuinely felt that. When he heard about something that he didn't know or didn't understand, he got genuinely excited. Could you imagine a situation where you got genuinely excited when you made a mistake or found some part where you were inadequate or didn't know? And you could go, fantastic. Now, this is a big stretch for us in the West because we are so achievement-oriented and this sort of positivism, not admitting to your mistakes and being, I can't even think of the language around it. But the experience of this is really, profound to the point where we've got to do all these positive affirmations all the time and everything's got to be positive. Could we really embrace this so-called negative and find it really fascinating? Now, I'm getting lost in a lot of verbiage here. Hopefully on the floor, somehow you're sorting this at an experiential level. That you can catch yourself next time you have that negative connotation or self-judgment about a mistake, that can be transformed. Is it possible? And what better kind of demonstration of kindness could we have than we had that approach to life for ourselves? And therefore, when somebody else makes a mistake, we could have the same kind of kindness. So when, the dumb person in the bank gives you the wrong change, instead of getting angry, you can go, that's really interesting. an interesting mistake. Doesn't mean to say that you put up with getting the wrong change. You can ask for the right change. Okay. It's 12:05. I don't feel the need to do any more ATM before lunch. What say you to an early lunch break? Do we say yes? Yes. We say yay. Okay. Early lunch break. So today, Zoran and Jenny and I are giving FI to Julie, Jane, and Anna. So the rest of you, as I said yesterday, feel free to watch, feel free to go for a walk, feel free to do whatever you like. I would encourage you to come back.